Hey, what's going on, guys? This video, we're going to be talking about the very first American Tier 10 heavy tank in the game. Also, my very first Tier 10 heavy tank and Tier 10 tank ever, the T110E5. Um, to this day, this is my favorite tank in the game. It's just got a phenomenal combination of, speed, firepower, um, accuracy on the move, mobility is great. The armor holds up pretty well if you use it intelligently, and that's really why I like using this tank. Um, this first match here, kind of a short match. I get a decent score individually, but didn't have a lot of help from the team. And right here, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. That on the move accuracy. This tank gun's great, and we're going to talk about it here in a second. But just wanted to show this first game, kind of showing differences between myself and another E5 who doesn't do bad. He's the guy spamming heat there. Um, so really quick, really brutal, fast. My team kind of collapses, but still pretty good showing for the tank. And the next two games are pretty phenomenal. So really unlucky shot there. So the T110E5, it was again one of the first tanks in the game when this game came out, and it has gone undergone maybe the most amount of changes of any tank in the game. That's probably not true, but it's just undergone so many that I could think of compared to other vehicles off the top of my head. And it's gone through periods where it's fairly weak. It's gone through periods where it's just completely broken and the best tank in the game. And it kind of sits somewhere between nowadays. So when this tank first arrived on the scene, the OG days, it was this thing, the E100 and the FE215B. Those were your three choices for top tier heavy tanks. And the 215B at the time, okay, this is no judgment on that tank today. It's actually pretty insane today. I really do like that tank. It wasn't very good. They didn't really have a decent vision of what they wanted out of a vehicle. It was a rear-mounted turret with crap side armor that was only, I think, 51 millimeters, so you couldn't side scrape, which really hurt it, and it had bad gun depression. So you were just kind of walking around with a lot of HP and a good firing gun. So the best two tier 10 heavies, to start out were the E5 and the E100, and two very very different kinds of tanks. So when I first got this, it was great. Got through the M103. It wasn't a bad grind by any means, but the M103 also didn't have the strengths this tank does. That feels more like a heavy. Didn't have the same ability or the kind of gun handling that did feel like a heavy tank gun on that tank. As for this thing, it just feels like it's incredible. It's the best gun in the game, in my opinion, at least for heavies. And I finally got this thing, and now I'm rolling with the big boys. I'm top tier. It's the first few months of full release. I kind of grinded like crazy, probably about 200-300 games to get through the M103 properly. And it was pretty good to start out. If you were in a heads up fight with an E100, premium was kind of hard to afford at the time. Premium ammo, that is, not so easy just to pen him. But he had a weaker turret than he does now, so you could actually engage him pretty effectively with his with your standard rounds rather. And there I go, 5.4k damage in that short game. Really, really did a good job. Blocked some shots there too, but the team just kind of collapsed, unfortunately. Second game here is on Safe Haven from the other side, and this is what happens when you have a team that doesn't completely collapse. And I just bully these guys. So, 400 alpha damage gun, the lowest alpha on a tier 10 at the time, but I mean, still healthy. 6 rounds a minute rate of fire when it first came out. So this was, more of a DPM gun compared to, say, the E100. He had about 15 to 20% more DPM than him. And it was comparable with the 215B. The 215B had an even faster rate of fire, but that tank just, it was not it was not good. So as time goes on, it goes through some periods. A lot of the different periods of Roll to Tanks wasn't necessarily just like 6.0. There is the HD model rework that had brought a lot of tanks into different kind of armor states. I can't remember if it really benefited this tank or not, but the thing with E5, as always, it has always been the case that the weak spots are very obvious, right? You have the lower plate, which every tank has lower plate, but the E5's lower plate isn't even so easy to pin. You saw in that first game, I was kind of having some trouble with standard against the other E5, and the lovely cupola of the turret. The strength of the E5, or its perceived strength in the game, is how much they buff that cupola on the turret or nerf it. If it's it's gone through stages where it was hard to pen, and this poor E5 is just getting his teammates are nulling him through, and that's why I hate that spawn. It's hard to play this corridor if you're that team. Um, but if the Cupola is buffed and it's hard to pen, this is the most broken tank in the game, and everyone hates it. And if Wargaming nerfs that Cupola, so it's easy to pen again, now it's completely useless, and people don't think it's a good tank. I couldn't disagree more. I don't think the strength of this tank comes from its Cupola. Its Cupola is, inconsistent to pen at times if you're wiggling and using some gun depression and turning your turret a lot. And also, if people are firing heat rounds to pen it more consistently to get over some of those funky angles, this Cupola right here uh, can be blocked with your own gun. And I don't think I do it too much in this video, but it really applies more for heat rounds because AP rounds will still go through your gun and hit the Cupola, but your gun completely negates heat, which is awesome. Um, so you keep that in mind, and you can kind of turn your turret to the left like 10, 15 degrees. It's not really far. You don't turn it much and raise your gun, and you'll frustrate a lot of people with that. Um, so, for the longest time, the tank kind of stayed in its base form, and it got some small buffs. And then in the past couple years, they really changed it quite a bit. So during the Reforge, I kind of talked about in the E50M video, they did a Reforge for this line where they changed some stuff. And this tank at that point still had its 400 alpha damage gun, but they buffed the rate of fire to the point where it was, oh gosh, I think it was like 6.82 or 89 rounds a minute base. And that's a lot of DPM. That's like tier 10 medium levels of rate of fire, and you're doing 400 alpha with a 120 mil gun on a heavy tank. And with all the way that the rate of fire buffs used to stack with each other between rammer and your commander skills. God, this Grill 15 just pops up out of nowhere and gets me, but I have good gun handling. I can pop him back. The way that all those abilities stacked, you had something like a 5.7 second reload, or maybe 6. Like it was crazy. You had like 4,200 damage per minute on a heavy tank that's also mobile and has functional and good armor. So, this thing just pumped out the damage. And before they kind of got rid of those changes, they changed it again, and not just this tank, but all tier 10 heavies. So that instead of having 400, you now have 440 alpha and still crazy DPM, which was just an unnecessary buff. Yeah, your rate of fire went down, but alpha is kind of king in this game, so I think overall it was a net positive for the vehicle. And you just pump out damage so fast with this vehicle. It's crazy. It's really enjoyable when you get in those brawls, and you're not just getting YOLO'd. If you're able to really find a corner, you're trained 2-for-1, and you're just DPMing enemies down, and it's fantastic. Um, and since that change, obviously then the DPM changes recently with Crew Skills 2.0 and all the equipment stuff. You don't have 4,000 DPM now, and that's obviously for the best. That's just a crazy level of DPM for any tank in the game. Night Stalker. And it's sitting pretty comfy at like 3.4 now. It still has great DPM compared to all the other vehicles in the game. Certainly the heavies. So, um, but I think it's in a really good state right now. The Cupola is not impenetrable. It's easy to pen with standard rounds if you hit towards the base and the collar, and none of the funky angles towards the top of it. So you'll still get some pretty lucky bounces. But you have to be mindful of your Cupola. So the couple ways you can mitigate that, we talked about the gun blocking already. Really easier or more effective for heat rounds. You could also fight on a corner as long as the corner and the wall is on your left side. It lets you side scrape around the wall while keeping your Cupola hidden and firing at enemies. And a side scraping E5 is really hard to deal with if you can't see his Cupola and he's angling well, because those tracks you see, they're really thick tracks, man. They're wide and they stick out pretty far. And your hole is shaped in a way that where it kind of curves in, so it's easy for them to think they're going to be able to hit your hole, and the shot just hits the tracks, never even reaches the hole, and just tracks you. It's a lot of fun, really, really good. You also have 8 degrees of gun depression on this vehicle, which is really nice. And the heat rounds are crazy. You saw me use them quite a bit there, fighting the type, I think it was type 4 heavy and the 279. 340 pen, I mean, just crazy good heat rounds. Nothing wrong with them whatsoever. Some of the best in the game. There aren't, meme tank destroyers like the Jagdpanzer, but This game right here was a mastery game. I'm really not a huge fan of Pilsen because, well, the tank, the or sorry, the map's not that bad if they do north-south spawn. I don't know why we do this northeast-southwest spawn because it divides the map wrong. Now you're doing an east-west battle. It plays a lot better on a north-south battle. You have clear lanes and ways to get around the map, and not just one team sitting hold down on the low ground and the other team sitting hold down on the high ground. So what I like to do from this spawn when it's this, I kind of push the middle here and see how the teams deploy, and then you can kind of make a play through the middle to go to the eastern or western, or I guess sorry, northern or southern flank, depending on how the tanks deploy and things like that. So that's why I'm making this push right here. I'm seeing all these campers right here like to sit there. This play kind of negates that because you could pop out and spot them for all your campers back in the hills. But you could kind of pull up to these piles of rubble and these doors and then just play close range where you're not playing the stupid vision game that this map kind of devolves to. You have 8 degrees of gun depression, so it's not as good as, say, like a Super Conqueror or, God forbid, a Krangbogen. Those machines better hold down fighters than you because they don't have cupolas and they have more gun depression. But you're super flexible in this tank, right? I run the turbo. It's not as good as it used to be. It used to give you 10% to your top speed. Now it gives you only 5% to your top speed, but also 5% engine power. So I'm usually going around 37, 38 kph on the flat, which is plenty for this kind of vehicle. It really is, the original Heavium, and it has been since it's been introduced to the game. Um, and I like to push up forward, kind of be aggressive, and use my newly buffed hit points. Those got updated too. It used to be 2200, now it's 2400. Um, and just play kind of aggressive and up front and be that top tier heavy that you want to be. And it's really why I love this tank. It's super flexible. It gives you options. It's not like like super heavies, which are really niche. They're really good at fighting corners and in urban environments. But the second you get on hills or on a bigger map, you're kind of SOL because your gun sucks at range and you have no camo and you're slow and all those issues. This tank, you're just that heavy. I mean, it's a great kind of archetype. And it's why, for my money, I think it's the best tier 10. I just do well in this tank consistently, and I know there's some crazy tier 10 heavies, the Warhammer ones, and you got stuff like the can opener, but those tanks to me are either just too inflexible. Like the can opener was the good at going hold down, cool. If you can't play hold down, great. You're just a tier 10 heavy tank with 2250 health. Granted, you could double shot, but you got a long reload, and I've killed a lot of can openers in my T110E5. Um, the Warhammer tanks, I mean, probably objectively the best tier 10 heavies because how broken they are, but I don't really consider those, man. Those are vehicles introduced, so whenever Wargaming's having a bad financial quarter, they can re-release those kinds of machines, the Night Stalker, and sell them for money, and everyone's gonna buy them because they're just plainly broken, and stupidly easy to play. But I still think, this tank has a much higher skill ceiling compared to a tank, tanks like those. You can bait shots with your hull. The way that the front hull is rounded and angled, and even the lower plate, it's not so easy to penetrate consistently or with any frequency whatsoever if you don't know where to shoot, and you can get some really funny bounces. The side armor with the tracks is really troll, the cupola is troll, and if you're moving and wiggling, a well-played E5 is probably more difficult to penetrate than, say, a mouse or this guy right here, the Type 5 Heavy. I mean, it's pretty clear where to shoot Type 5 Heavy at all times, especially, I mean, I'm loading the heat here because if Wargaming gave that tank an actual weak spot, I would love to shoot standard, but I'd prefer not to bounce half my rounds due to no fault of my own, just because I need a good penetration roll to go through any of his armor, right? Um, so you see this game here. We're kind of this was a close game and it still is on the board, but we positionally here they didn't win their flank in the north. We won our flank in the south, and now we're just kind of mopping up. And I'm bullying these tanks. I'm still on full health here. And I've just been pushing this whole game. And tanks either that have shot at me have bounced, or I think a lot of the times what ends up happening, kind of like that, they don't know where to shoot you, so they'd rather shoot anybody else who's on the flank with you. And it's just this tank rewards aggression so well. You have crazy DPM, good mobility, and frontal armor, and it's a joy to play, man. This was the first tank I ever 3 marked at tier 10, And it was kind of cool because it was my first tier 10 heavy, and I used to be of the opinion, because I actually sold this tank at one point, maybe when it wasn't so good, but I bought it back because I just saw the Super Conqueror was better, right? You had the same kind of gun, but you had a better turret armor, you're easier to go hold down, and you had that was a terrible shot. You had a horrible lower plate, and just like the E5. So what's the point of the E5? And then I bought it back, and I mean, after about 2 or 3 weeks of playing it, I had it three marked, and my eyes were kind of open to it. So, um, you know, tier 10 American Heavy, the whole American Heavy tank line is phenomenal. I mean, there's not really a stinker in it. The T32, like I talked about in that video, back in the day, a little bit of a letdown, but turns out that thing's fantastic now. The T29 needs no introduction. That tank is stupidly good. The M103 is, maybe kind of the weaker of the entries, but that's just because Tier 9 is Tier 10. And what I mean by that is 90% of your games in Tier 9 will be Tier 10 games, just because that's the most populated battle rank or tier in the game. And it's unfortunate, but that's where the game is. So you're just playing a worse E5 most of the time, but you can still do well. You have the same gun. And then this thing, right? So this is probably a tank that a lot of people have. It was probably a lot of people's first tier 10, and I'm happy to say in 2026, it's still amazing. It still kicks a lot of ass. 8.3k damage, almost 8.4, 3 kills and 1700 XP. Didn't even lose that much health, and that was a mastery game. Really, really happy with playing this tank. It's my go-to when I'm having a rough session, so um, yeah, I'm glad to see these old tanks I've been covering are doing all right, and we'll kind of keep the content flowing. I am moving here soon, so I probably won't be uploading for maybe the better part of a week or two. I'll probably still be recording. It'll just take me a second to kind of get set up in my new place and get all my recording stuff set up, and I'll probably need a longer cable for the place I'm moving to. So happy to get this one up before I move. And if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a comment or a like, and I will talk to you soon.